Welcome back. Several states are passing laws to force employers to share salary information during the hiring process. One of those is Maryland. And with recent historic rises in inflation, salary transparency could prove a more important factor than ever for at least some workers. So joining me now to dive into the issue, Chris Marr, a labor reporter with Bloomberg Law. Chris, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So we'll talk about how this may end up in the courts in a moment, but first let's talk about what states are doing to tackle pay equity. In your article, you mentioned that right now women are making about 80 cents on the dollar compared to men in America. That number goes down even when we're talking about black women. Some states are trying to tackle the issue of pay equity, especially in the labor market we're in right now. So what are they doing?
That's right. So we're seeing states pass laws. Some of the most recent require employers to provide a pay range within the job ads that you would see online or wherever applicants might be looking for jobs. So there's a law like that taking effect in the next couple of months in New York City and also Washington State. And there are similar laws, similar bills waiting for the governors to sign them in California and New York State.
And how are these laws that are going through, as you mentioned, in a number of states across the country, going to maybe create some issues for some of the employers that they would regulate that might end up in the courts?
Sure. So I think policymakers' goals with these laws is to improve pay transparency, make it easier for people to know what they're going to be paid and how their pay compares to their coworkers. With the goal of making it less likely that women and workers of color face pay discrimination. The complication for employers is that as your employees are able to look and see what their coworkers make and what new hires are going to make, some employees might decide, well, I'm being underpaid. And if people feel like maybe they're being underpaid because of their gender or their race or nationality, that could lead to discrimination lawsuits.
You mentioned the state of Maryland in your article. They've been kind of one of the leaders in passing these types of laws, or at least have been able to get one on the books recently. What is the state of the law on pay transparency in Maryland right now?
Sure. So Maryland hasn't gone quite as far yet in requiring salary information in the job ads, but they have taken several other steps, like some other states. So one of the things that's required in Maryland is that employers have to be ready to provide pay information to a job applicant upon request. So if the job applicant, theoretically at the first interview or on an initial phone interview, asks for that information, the employer has to provide it. And also, like a lot of states, Maryland bans employers from requiring job applicants to share their prior salary history from previous jobs. And quite a few states have done that, with the idea being if people have been underpaid in previous jobs, that's probably going to follow them to their future jobs. If the employer is basing their salary on what they previously made.
Yeah, sometimes the problem can go both ways. Not only are employers not disclosing what the range is, but then they ask employees what they've made. So obviously Maryland and others are trying to tackle that. So what sort of penalties are we looking at for these companies if they are perhaps finding themselves running afoul of these laws? Is this a money issue, or what kind of penalties are we looking at?
Sure, and that varies from state to state. As far as the laws requiring companies to put salary info in the job ads, in a lot of places that's something that would go through a state agency like a Department of Labor, and the company could face civil penalties for that. Probably the bigger risk as far as employer legal liability is being sued by employees who feel like they're being underpaid. A
Right.
discrimination lawsuit like that ends up in court, and the courts can decide how much the employer owes in terms of back wages to the employee.
And just quickly at the end here in just a few seconds, we have a lot of small businesses in our backyard in the DMV. Are these types of laws ones that would apply to big employers and to small ones? Is this something that could maybe open up and increase the risk to small businesses too?
There again, that varies from state to state. In some states, we are seeing that these laws only apply to larger employers, and how that threshold is defined varies. Some places are saying, it's companies with 15 or more employees, but it varies a lot from place to place as far as the size of company that it applies to. In some cases, it will apply to very small companies. The New York State bill that's waiting for the governor's signature would apply to all employers with 4 or more employees. So that gets down to pretty small businesses.
Well, it's a topic that's very important to nearly every single one of us who go through this process every few years as we look at a labor market that is continuing to struggle in this country. So, Chris Marr, thank you for this important reporting. Chris with Bloomberg Law, thanks for joining us.